remember first hearing him. He did a guest spot on an LL Cool J song called 4321, and I think it was the third verse of the song jumps in there. Very fresh sounding, the voice. Like, you have all these hip hop acts through the years that have their signatures, and some of them are great, some of them are just whatever to me. Like, at least in my opinion, DMX had a signature voice, had a raspy but direct, almost like a he would be like what a like like how I would view James Brown, for example, vocally. Like, he had a signature voice like James Brown for hip hop, like the grunts and the ad libs and all that. Like, he was a rapper, but he kind of felt like creative in a way. Like, he used his voice. He knew his voice. He wasn't just somebody who was rhyming over music. He was actually really putting his all, creatively into the music. And that's what I like about DMX a lot. Like, he always seemed to he carved his own niche in a sense. Think about him in his passing. Because he first came on the radar for me in 1998, 1999. 98 definitely, when when his Hell and Darkest Hot, album came out, and Fresh My Flesh, Blood My Blood. Those first two albums. My favorite album actually is his third album. And then there was X. A little more mainstream sounding, because at that point he became this really big megastar worldwide, but he still kept it authentic and honest. But it's funny because I was thinking about his impact. Because it's been so long since he was really truly a mainstream star. It's been about 20 years since he was on that top of the hill, And I was thinking about this throughout the weekend, when he passed, and seeing all the tributes. And by the way, the tributes is fantastic. Seeing some of the videos of him with people, hearing the stories. It's really good energy, really positive energy about him. Especially something that's tragic as a drug overdose. I know we can go through discussion about personal accountability, and I get that. And and obviously, you don't want to, he's a celebrity. He has more access to, getting better, to healing himself. But the thing about DMX I always liked more than anything in the world was that it was never bullshit with him. He was always honest. It's like when he told a story about his life through his music, he was pretty direct about it. He was pretty like he was giving you his all, and that was it. And this is who I am. Take it or leave it. I always felt like he was one of the most honest artists, not just in hip hop, but in music in general. Like, all his pain and his victories and all that, and the struggles he went through, you really felt that because he gave it to you pretty much directly. It is what it was. What it is. You took it to leave it with DMX. But the thing about DMX, I was thinking about too, also more than anything else besides that what it said there, was that he came at a time in the late 90s, 98 especially, where hip-hop was kind of in flux at that point. Now, hip-hop was huge in the 90s, but in 1996, we lose Tupac in September 96, in Las Vegas, that murder. Then 6 months later, we lose Biggie, Notorious B.I.G., in March. So at the time, hip-hop was kind of like in flux. You lose the two biggest stars in the genre in a span of 6 months. You have this East-West thing, which back then, I was in high school, so I was kind of, into it a little bit because at the time, I'm a New Yorker and like, oh yeah, East Coast, the East Coast, the best coast, and fuck the West and all that. But come on, you look at hindsight, that's kind of silly. You look at it today, but it was in flux. Like, we didn't know who's the next guy up, who's the next man up, who was gonna take hip hop to the next level. There was a question of who was the next guy up. You had names here and there, but they weren't Biggie, they weren't Tupac. They didn't have the character or the, the personality that I felt that were big enough to really fit that. And then you have two hip hop artists that really took the keys, in my opinion. Well, one is Jay-Z, who of course now Jay-Z's arguably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, influential hip hop artists, in the last quarter century. The other, in my opinion, was DMX. You can argue DMX was first because Jay-Z really did break through in '98. The Hard Knock album and all that. Jay-Z really didn't really become Jay-Z until 2001. Like, to me, Jay-Z really hit his stride in 2001 with the Blueprint album. But DMX, to me, was the first guy that I really gravitated to that was like, oh, wow, what is this? This is cool. And for me, especially, too, it was a little bit of a culture shock, too, because back then, so in 1998, 1998, I was just finishing high school. I was huge in the church at that point. I really, to be honest with you, I had to stop listening to secular music for a long time. Even though I got into hard rock and heavy metal and all that, and at that time I still listened to hip hop. I still listened to a lot of hip hop music. But I started when I started going to church even more back then. I had actually taken a break from secular music. So right when Biggie passed away is when I stopped listening to hip hop for a little bit. Oh, secular music as a whole, honestly. Come back in 98, 99-ish. And this is DMX. Like, whoa. Now, granted, I heard the song I did with LL back in 97, 4321, but it was like, oh, it's cool, but it never really stuck. It never really stuck with me beyond that. So when I get into DMX in 98, 99, I'm like, this is crazy. This guy sounds great. What is this? And to me, I won't go so far as say he saved hip hop because I think hip hop would have survived no matter what. But I think what DMX did, and Jay-Z did especially too, right after him, around the same time, and then of course Eminem, gets huge in 2000s, is that DMX kind of took over the wheel and gave it back some direction, unified it a little bit too. The East-West thing was pretty much done. Like we were over that crap. Just give us good music, and DMX brought that. DMX brought that shit. He brought it to the mainstream. He brought it heavy, and he brought it authentic. And to me, that's the impact of DMX, in my opinion, is that he came at a time where we weren't sure where this thing was going. It wasn't going to die. It would survive. But who's the next guy up? Who's the next man up to take over the keys to be the guy? And to me, honestly, for a couple of years, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, DMX was that guy. DMX was played at clubs. He was playing the mainstream radio. The Party Up song. That was played on mainstream radio, contemporary radio. He was the guy for a couple of years. So the impact was felt. I mean, the guy sold over 70 million copies of his material worldwide. Which, again, in hip-hop, it's a big deal. Like, not very many hip-hop artists can sell that many records worldwide. It's not really heard. It's not heard of, certainly on a wide scale. DMX was one of those guys. So you look back and you look at great hip-hop artists of the last quarter century or even larger. You talk about the LL Cool J's, obviously. You talk about the Jay-Z's, obviously. Biggie and Tupac. That makes total sense. And you know what's up with that. Eminem, obviously one of the greatest selling artists in the last quarter century. Not just in hip-hop, but in music history anyway. DMX is in that conversation. DMX took over the controls in 98, 99 and gave hip-hop back some direction that we had lost following the passing of Biggie and Tupac. So that's big. That's DMX's, and that's Earl Simmons' number one biggest influence and biggest accomplishment to hip hop. And for that, if you're a hip hop fan, especially, you better be thankful for that. Not saying